Hey, this is Tommy Chong, and you're listening to Fascination Street podcast. I like being on Fascination Street. You know, things fascinate me.
I believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear them. So come with me as we take a walk down Fascination Street.
Welcome back, Streetwalkers. Guess what? This is the 300th episode of Fascination Street Podcast. That's why the release date was a little bit different than it normally is. Because of who the guest is for this landmark 300th episode, it was only right to release it today on April 20th, 4/20. This episode is with the legendary Tommy Chong. That's right, that Tommy Chong. You know Tommy Chong from Cheech Chong, the movies and the albums. You know him from getting arrested for selling bongs and going to prison. Has his own brand of weed. You know, Tommy Chong. In this episode, we talk about growing up in Canada and what that was like for him, and this unexpected tangent that took him off into a musical career where he got to be on stage with the likes of Jimi Hendrix, and he got to hang out with the Beatles. He wrote many songs, but he wrote a song called Does Your Mama Know About Me that was recorded by Diana Ross and the Supremes. I mean, the dude worked for Motown. Anyway, he tells Motown stories, he tells Jimi Hendrix stories, obviously he tells Cheech Chong stories, talk about how he met Cheech, and we talk about who his cellmate was in prison, none other than the Wolf of Wallstreet himself, Jordan Belfort, and the hand that Tommy played in Jordan Belfort writing that book. And of course, no Tommy Chong interview would be complete if I didn't get him to tell the story of their very first sketch, Dave's Not Here. I couldn't think of a better guest to help me celebrate my 300th episode, and I couldn't think of a better day to release this episode than 4/20. This is my conversation with legend and hysterically funny comedian and writer, Tommy Chong.
Yeah, talk to me, yeah.
Welcome to Fascination Street Podcast, Tommy Chong. How you doing today, Tommy?
I'm doing great, man. About the same as yesterday and the day before.
What about tomorrow?
And the day before. Tomorrow's, we don't know. We don't know. None of us know about tomorrow.
So, Tommy Chong, the way I like to get to know the guests is to find out where you were born and raised, and that kind of helps us understand how you got from where you were to where you are. So where were you born, man? Where'd you grow up?
I was born in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.
They got the Oilers, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oilers. Yeah. Eskimos. But I grew up in Calgary, which is 300 miles south. Where are you calling from?
San Antonio, Texas.
Oh, so yeah, there's a lot of Canadians down there.
There's a ton.
There's a lot of everything down there.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So you're growing up in Calgary. What did your parents do?
My dad was a truck driver, distant, like those guys that are blocking the border. He was one of those drivers. He drove a big rig. My mother was an old-fashioned housewife. She didn't work. She had TB when I was 2 years old, and they operated on her. And she ended up with one lung, but it kept her until she died. So she was just a housewife.
I mean, no, that sounds terrible to say, but your mom was pretty lucky in that she survived it all. My grandfather, my dad's dad, he died of tuberculosis like in the 1980s.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Basically, he was sick and they didn't know what was wrong with him, and they put him in the hospital and they did every test in the world on him except that one.
Except TB. Oh, my God. You know, you could catch it so easy. It's wondering no one else got it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I think the most that anybody nowadays knows, like the average person about TB, is that that's what Doc Holliday had.
Yeah. Well, you know, that was a pandemic.
Yeah.
TB. You know, my mother, I never saw her for 5 years. She was quarantined away.
For 5 years?
Yeah.
Whoa.
4 or 5 years, yeah. We'd visit her. We'd be at the bottom, and she'd on the second floor, and she'd come to the window and wave and yell at my dad a little bit. She couldn't yell too much because she only had one lung.
Sure. But she could shake that finger.
Yeah, and say, get those boys decent clothes.
Yeah. It's cold up here. Put some coats on those kids. What did you think you were going to be? I mean, your dad was a truck driver. I don't know a whole lot about what people do in Canada or Calgary for industry, but what did you think you were going to be when you were growing up?
I had no idea. I was either going to be a badass, not a criminal, but, I had no idea. I wasn't that good in school. I was really good in literature. That was my only subject that I really liked. I tried, kind of, but you know what I found out? No one knew that I had bad eyesight until I was about 13 or so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so that's why I couldn't do good in school. I used to get up from my seat and walk up to the board and look at it. But back then, no one thought, oh, the guy needs glasses.
Yeah, because you're reading all the time. They're like, well, clearly he can see. He's reading all these books.
Yeah. So I got glasses, but I can play guitar, but I'm not a guitar player. And that's really my whole life, is I can do a lot of things, but that never defined me as, oh, I think I want to be this for the rest of my life, I guess I kind of followed my dad, because my dad, who was Chinese, never hardly spoke. He wasn't a man of, he wasn't a philosopher by no means. He was very Chinese and very old school. Like when he went on the road, he would never say goodbye. He would just leave. And when he come home, he'd never say hello. He'd just appear. It was interesting. And my mother, I found out just recently that she was 20 some odd % Native, because her mother was half. And that was a big scandal that no one talked about back then, I mean, you did not admit that you had any Native blood in you at all back then. But I found out that I'm 9% Native.
9. Oh, well, there you go.
And when I found that out, everything in my life made sense.
How so?
I used to have the urge when I was a kid. We grew up in the country. Like, we grew up beside a farm. We never owned a farm, but we had a house that was beside a farm. It was a cottage with outdoor plumbing, the outhouse. My dad bought it. I think he paid $500 for the house, and a nice sizable yard, really nice.
Nice.
And we had a garden, for all the necessities. See, my mother, she never had the strength to do anything. So my older brother, that's why he grew up kind of tough, because he was like a little man, from the age of 6 when he could carry something. He was my mom's helper. And that's what you did in the country, you did chores.
Right.
To live. Bring in the water, go to the pump yard, pump up water, and carry the wood in. And this is in Calgary, where we went through a few winters where it was sub-zero for weeks and months,
Wow.
It was a very rustic, but it was like native. Now that I think about it, it was like living on a reservation, So I learned to play the guitar when I was 8 years old. And there's a fiddle player across the field. And I was enlisted to play dances, house parties.
Wow.
So that kind of steered me into music. I got known as a backup guitar player. And there was one Native Indian singer. And we did country songs, the latest Hank Snow. And then when Elvis hit, then he started doing an imitation of Elvis. And then I joined him as his backup guitar player. And next thing you know, we were doing shows, opening up for singing groups back then. When you play music, that precedes everything. You can't do anything because you got a gig,
Oh, yeah.
But I was still going to school, and I had no idea why. I tried to get into, the matriculation so I could go to university, but I never did get a hold of algebra. Algebra and I were friends, but we were not acquaintances,
They used to say, oh, I'm never going to use that. And I'm pretty sure you never really did use it in your real life.
Well, what it is, it gives you a mountain to climb.
Right.
And it teaches you how to concentrate and to persevere.
How to think.
Yeah, the persevering part, because algebra, like chess, it just takes time and you got to concentrate. I'm too much of a writer, actually. That's what I found out that I am. if I want to pigeonhole myself somewhere, it would be I'm a writer because I have written books. So I'll admit to that.
Well, there you go. So when you're playing guitar and you're opening up for these singing groups, was that the Vancouvers or was that even before then?
Oh, no, it was way before then. We never really had a name. In fact, the Vancouvers wasn't a name.
Really?
Wasn't our band name. No. See, that's what I'm saying. I was part of a group, but I was never a leader of a group. I was always the guy kind of like behind the scenes. And like I said, I'm a writer, so I'm interested in everybody's stories.
That's what we do here. Fascination Street is built on the fact that everybody has a story and I want to hear them and share them.
Yeah, that's exactly the attitude that I went into prison with. And that's exactly the attitude that I had all my life. I want to hear the story. You meet someone and they're interesting. I want to hear them. Like, I grew up in the 50s. And for instance, there was a Hungarian Revolution going. There's always been a revolution going on ever since I can remember. And so there was a lot of foreigners coming into Calgary because you could get into Canada pretty easy, especially if you were Hungarian or Russian or anything. And when I'd meet the kids at school, they were the ones I really wanted to get to know. I want to hear their stories. And I'm still the same way. I haven't changed at all.
Well, I love that you're a storyteller because hopefully you'll share some stories with me. But real quick, can you sing Ooh, Ooh, White Girls by Parliament for me real quick?
Ooh, white girls sure been delicious to me.
Now, why did Diana Ross ask you to stop singing that?
Well, she was crossing over. Barry Gordy had it in mind that to get to the real money, you had to entertain white folks on their level, And so that's what they try to do with all the black acts, including Billie Holiday, In fact, Billie Holiday was considered suitable for white acts because, even though she sang Strange Fruit, she was like Frank Sinatra's favorite singer.
Walk me through, I guess you're touring with the Vancouvers and you're opening up for Diana Ross. And then she's like, hey, can you not sing that song?
Well, the Vancouvers, first of all, my first band, The Shades,
Ooh.
We were like the first punk group, interracial group. In fact, that's why we were called The Shades, because there was a full-blood native, Sarsi Indian native. I hate to say Indian, but that's what we called them back then. Tommy Melton, which was a descendant of a black African slave from America. Tommy was a football star when I met him, and then myself. And so we called ourselves The Shades because we were different colors, rare, medium, and well done, is what we called them.
What year is this around?
This is 56, 55, 56, 57, 58. And then I always had a social consciousness. Like you asked me, what do I wanted to be? I used to hang out with the rough crowd. They were called zoot suiters or hoods back in the day, wore big draped pants and long hair, ducktail haircuts. Kind of like Trump looks like, he's like an old zoot suiter.
Picture Michael Jackson in the Smooth Criminal video.
I'm sorry. No, the zoot suit with the pig pants. That was the people that I liked and hung with. And I found out later that a lot of them were half breeds, half native and half this and brown and, the outlaws. And the reason I got hung up with them was that when I was a kid, about 11, 12, 13, around that, I would walk to school in Canada. There was no school buses. You walked to school. I used to walk with these girls, older girls, and I'd listen to them. And they would be telling me what they liked in guys. And to a lot of people surprised, they never went for the clean-cut football hero. The girls that I walked with, they always liked the dark, mysterious badasses. The loner. He had long hair. He was mysterious, And so I gravitated toward that because that was more me. I wasn't an athlete. My brother was an athlete, but I spent too many months in the hospital when I was 4 years old, 5 years old, almost a year. And so my legs never developed properly. Like my brothers did, because he was like from the ghetto almost. That's how tough he was. So our first band we put together, it comprised of Tommy Melton was black, and he was a star running back. He was being groomed for the pros, but he was black. Dick Bird, like I said, was full-blood Native. Then myself, half Chinese. My brother was half Chinese. The sax player was what they back in the day called a mulatto. He was tall, beautiful, half black sax player, Pete Watts. And then we had a white drummer, Eric. But we were the kind of band we would play anywhere because we were mixed blood. There'd always be some racist fool come up and say something stupid. And my brother, like I said, my brother and Pete and Tommy, they were all semi-pro football players. And so if any altercation broke out, it was usually because of my brother. And so that was our reputation. You know, we not only played music, but we could kick ass. It was a weird mixture because, like I said, I hung with a rough crowd. I got in trouble. This other friend of mine, he actually was going to be our roadie, but he had other plans. There was no such thing as a roadie back in the day, you know. Roadies back then were called fathers or brothers.
They were called family and friends.
Relatives, yeah. And so I got in trouble. This friend of mine stole the car, and then he stalled it right near my house, phoned me up. He says, I got a car. Come on. It's stalled or something. He wanted me to help him start it up again. So I got up. I was either in bed or going to bed. And so I just walked over to where he was. He wasn't far. He was on his way to pick me up. And so we're under the hood trying to fix it. And the cops pull up. And of course, we ran like crazy, but the snow had just fallen. And so the cops just looked at our footprints and sort of followed us into our house and knocked on the door. And my mother answered. Of course, my mother, she's cool. She said, "Oh, they've been here all night." And then the cop, "Yeah, right." And he walked in, and we had got into bed with our clothes on. So it wasn't too hard. So we ended up in jail. And it was the first time for me. And I was young, and I looked even younger. And so I'm in jail, behind bars, spend the night. And rather than being ashamed or embarrassed or anything, I was excited. It was like, ooh, this is exciting, because it was, But when I got out and I went to court, then I realized, man, you don't do things like that. This is not the right thing to do. And plus you're going to get in trouble. And so we got fined $100. It was called joyriding, which I never got in the car. I guess I could have beat it up, I don't know. Anyway, so I developed a social consciousness. I realized, there's nothing for teenagers to do in Calgary. Not that there was no dances. They had community dances, but it wasn't the same. It had to be from that community and nothing exciting. And so we had a band. We had nowhere to play. So I was friends with whose dad ran the boys club of Calgary. And so he helped me set up a dance every Saturday at the Legion Hall. And we formed a teen club called the Shades Teen Club. And again, I never ever played music for money. I started out playing for parties. And if you got paid, it was like a bonus. You got a tip. Oh, wow, this is great. In fact, when we started playing at the Shades Teen Club, we only paid a band like about $20 a head, Teenagers from all over Calgary. In fact, they were coming in from Edmonton, Lethbridge, because there was absolutely nothing for kids to do back then. And then here's a dance, playing rock and roll, like in the 50s, it would had to be 56, 57. And then 58, we got kicked out of Calgary. The mayor and the chief of police had us come to the city hall for a meeting. And the meeting was to tell us to get the hell out of town.
Wow.
Because the Christmas season was coming on and we attracted too many people for the cops to handle, because they made us quit at 12 midnight because of the church laws. And so you got all these kids with nothing to do at midnight. And instead of being at a dance, they started going to house parties or where someone was babysitting, and they would invade the house and, take over, steal the booze and fight and do everything that badass kids did back then. And so we got kicked out of Calgary. But instead of fighting it like we should have, we said, oh, good, let's go. Another adventure. And so we're on our way to Vancouver. Yay. So, yeah, that was the story of my life. I had a social conscience, but I also liked the excitement of what was going on,
Sure.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors.
So I ran into previous guest of this show, Chris Gronkowski, the other day, and it went a little something like this.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, Chris. Hey, you know what sucks? When I get done with my workout at the gym, my protein shake's not cold anymore, man. It's room temperature.
Weird. I haven't run into you at the gym lately.
Busted. Okay, truth be told, I don't work out, but I do get thirsty after a long day of podcasting. I just can't seem to keep my cocktails cold.
You should use an ice shaker.
What's an ice shaker?
The ice shaker is a double-walled, vacuum-insulated stainless steel shaker bottle with a patented twist and agitator that breaks up the protein powders.
So you're saying I should switch to an ice shaker, take out the agitator so I can fit more ice in the cup and it'll stay cold longer?
Steve, you don't need more ice. The ice shaker is third-party tested and verified to keep your drink cold for 30-plus hours.
Chris, you're a genius. I'll still remove the patented screw and agitator and just add more booze.
I guess technically you could, but if you actually use the ice shaker as a protein drink cup, the agitator breaks up the powder and doesn't bounce around like you're shaking a paint can.
Why are we still talking? Let's party.
Gronk style!
That's right, Streetwalkers. Ice Shaker is the new sponsor at Fascination Street Podcast. Ice Shaker is made from kitchen-grade stainless steel so it doesn't smell all funky after you use it a couple of times like those cheap plastic ones. When I'm out and about doing interviews or partying Gronk style, I use the Fascination Street Podcast Edition 26-ounce Flex Ice Shaker cup, and it keeps my drink cold until the sun comes up. You saw Ice Shaker on Shark Tank. All 5 sharks made an offer with Mark Cuban and Alex Rodriguez closing the deal. Now you can get a deal too. Order your own 26-ounce Flex Cup right now at iceshaker.com and use the promo code FSP for $5 off your first order. Once again, that's iceshaker.com, promo code FSP, as in Fascination Street Pod, for $5 off your first order. That's iceshaker.com, promo code FSP.
Let's get back into it.
Tell me about the time you shared a stage with Jimi Hendrix.
Was it Chicago? Yeah, I think it was Chicago was doing, the documentary of it. Oh, yeah, it was. So Jimi Hendrix shows up at Chicago and he calls everybody by name. Jimmy was really beautiful guy. And so, hey, Steve, I think it was Steve Katz and something. Hey, mind if I sit in? And here's my guitar. No. And Jimmy said, no, you play, I'll do my thing. Well, we were in England and we were playing our gig, Bobby Taylor. Again, we never had a name back then. We were the Vancouvers, I don't think. Oh, we were the Vancouver group. That was it. But by then, we had toured around enough. And Bobby was a legend. He was like Wilson Pickett, or he was in that level.
Okay.
He was up there with all those guys. And Bobby's biggest problem was that he was like my hoodlum friends, Back then, you weren't only a singer. You were a pimp. You were a gambler, usually. You were on the verge, on the edge, always. And the singing just brought the ladies that would give you presents, and that was Bobby. And so Bobby was his own worst enemy. He was from the ghetto in New York, and he was a doo-wop singer. There was a group called Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers. They made it in the Alan Feed's rock and roll show. Well, Bobby was in a group called the Pastels, and he did a record, you can get it on Alexa or whatever, called Been So Long by the Pastels. And that was Bobby's first hit, but he never went under the name of Bobby Taylor because he was a ringer, a serviceman, the military contest. And so they faked like Bobby was in the Air Force. And so they entered the contest and the song got recorded and it did really well in the hit parade, but they never won the contest. So that's how good Bobby was. So Bobby's singing was the one that really, the word got around in the rhythm and blues world. And so when we were in England, we're playing this little club and it was empty. There was nobody there. And we got to play the club because we were there to back up Chris Clark. So Barry Gordy or the Motown got us a gig. And so we're playing to this empty club. And then the doors opened and Jimi Hendrix walked in like a Pied Piper. And there was maybe 200 people behind him. They all followed Jimmy in there. Jimmy walked up to the stage and he called me by name because I was kind of like the undesignated leader of the group,
Okay.
because I was the one that kind of arranged to have stuff. Well, actually, I was the one that would keep Bobby under control long enough for him to do the gig and not cause too much stuff. And the way I did that was just by telling Bobby, well, let's do this song or that song. Because Bobby was phenomenal with his voice and he knew all the hip songs. And so Jimmy, when he walked up, he called me, hey, Tommy, you mind if I sit in?
Wow.
And I felt like, there's an old thing with bands and that, you usually tell the guy, maybe the last set.
Yeah.
Right now, we're working on our own stuff, blah, blah, blah. And so I had that urge to say that to Jimmy. Of course, I never. I just whipped off my guitar and handed it to him. And he says, no. He said, I'll play bass, because he's a left-handed guitar player.
Right.
And he couldn't play my guitar. I mean, probably could, but he just wanted to hear Bobby. He just wanted to be on stage, Jimmy missed that. That was the trouble with being a big star, You only play when there's thousands of people in front of you.
Right.
And Jimmy would sit in and, that's what you did. You're only happy when you're playing, especially with Bobby singing. And so we played all night. In fact, the owner of the club had to pull the plug. We'd still be playing. Then after, Jimmy, he was really sparse with the conversation. You never had a conversation with Jimmy. At least I never. I don't know too many people that did, In fact, no one really knew he could sing until the girl that discovered him suggested, hey, you can be a huge thing, but you got to write your own songs and you got to sing. And so Jimmy, who was usually just a guitar player, he come up with those great classics. They're not classics now. And so after the gig, we went up to our hotel room. Jimmy excused himself, went into the bathroom. And we never saw him the rest of the night. He stayed in the bathroom. Luckily, there was two toilets, so he didn't cause too much trouble. But that was it. And then the next day, we're driving to the airport, and we're driving in a limousine that the Beatles were famous for using it. And all the guys in the band, they're all excited, talking about, man, we played with Jimi Hendrix. And for some reason, I blurted out, I'm going to be bigger than Hendrix someday. And it stopped the conversation, believe me. Now, there's only one guy that's alive today his name is Eddie Patterson. He was a guitar player. See, I was always the rhythm guitar player. And lead if no one else showed up. But I was never a real guitar player. Eddie was. And he's still alive. And I talked to him not too long ago, a few years ago. And he teaches guitar now. And he's in Toronto. I said, you tell your people about us meeting Hendrix? He said, man, every day.
I love that story. Now, you brought up the Beatles with that limousine. I heard a rumor that you smoked weed with all of the Beatles except Paul. Is that true?
Yeah. Well, I smoked in front of Ringo. Ringo was not a weed smoker, at least when I met him. He was on the wagon. I smoked in front of John. I didn't see him we were at a party at Lou Adler's house, and I went into the bedroom to smoke a joint, stinky old joint. And John was there, sitting on the floor by the bed, not on the bed, but on the floor. And when I finally saw him, I went over and handed him the joint. He refused, very polite. He said, he had immigration problems. And then I remember being at a party with Ringo, and I know I'm smoking. I didn't necessarily stand in front of him, but, I'd met Ringo. And Cheech really hung with him more than I did, because Cheech hung with Nielsen, and Ringo did too. Everybody did. But George and he's another guitar player. So now George actually kind of made a point of coming over to where I was. We were at a party in Malibu, and I was smoking a joint, and George walked over and he joined me. And I gave him a toke, and then he handed it to a guy next to him. And I looked at it. I said, that Tony Dow? The Wally of Leave It To Beaver? I said, Wally? Gee, Ward's really going to be pissed off at you. And Tony Dow gave me that, like he's heard that a million times, Turned out that Tony Dow is quite an artist. He's a sculptor, and he's been smoking weed since he could, And so there's three of us, George, Tony Dow, and myself. That was sweet. George was in A.lert Records, the same building we were in. And when we did Basketball Jones, George played the intro to our tune. So if you hear Basketball Jones, there's a beautiful guitar intro, and it was all George.
I did not know that.
basketball Jones. I got a basketball Jones. Got a basketball Jones. Oh, baby, ooh. Yes, I'm the victim of a basketball Jones. Ever since I was a little baby, I always be dribbling. In fact, I was the baddest dribbler in the whole neighborhood.
Yeah, that's very special. Very special. In fact, I'm looking at doing a Cheech Chong farewell tour when everything can. And I'm going to get whatever guitar player we get to play with us to learn that, that introduction that George played. I could, but like I said, I'm more of a rhythm guitar player. You got to be a special breed, to be a lead anything.
Right. Agreed. So how did you meet Cheech Marin?
Everything in my life has been serendipity since the beginning, since my first glimpse of reality, of being in the world. I mean, even my early childhood was very serendipity. Actually, I spent time in a manger, if that makes any sense. When I was born, my mom and dad had a homestead. They were given a homestead. You had to apply, and they had a homestead. And the only building that was still on the homestead was an old chicken coop, which they cleaned and renovated so that we could at least live in it. And so my early coming out of the hospital, I lived in a manger. And I think that had something to do with my life. And my mother was a great storyteller. You talk about storytellers, because that's what we did back then. We had a radio, but there was no entertainment except yourselves. And that's what old folks would do, sit around the table or sit around the fireplace or the stove where you get warm and tell stories. And my mother, she would tell these great stories. And she told me about when we were leaving the homestead, because my dad tried to operate a turkey farm. And for some reason, it didn't work, among other things that my dad tried and didn't work. And my dad was also a gambler, being Chinese. He was a gambler and a hustler. And he hustled pool, and he hustled quite a more of that. He wasn't that tall. He was 5'3", but he was man. He was a running back at his high school.
Oh, wow.
Him and his brother, my older uncle, Uncle Tommy, was a gymnast coach at the University of Alberta. All his life. He spent his whole life in there. I forgot the question again.
How'd you meet Cheech?
Oh, Cheech. Okay. That's a good question. Okay. Alberta, that's where I kind of grew up, early life and everything. Cheech, in the meantime, grew up in South Central LA, and he was struggling. He was actually chasing women. He met a girl that he wanted to get to know, and he's, "Where are you going?" She says, "I'm going to my pottery class." And so Cheech says, "Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. I think I'll take pottery." So, being a Mexican, it was a natural for him. And so when the draft board decided that they needed more Mexicans, Cheech headed up to Canada. He had seen Muhammad Ali give a speech, and he burned his draft card, and he got in the next bus and headed for Canada. And he ended up right where I grew up, not too far away. He ended up working for a world-class potter called Johanchuk. He was a Ukrainian potter, master potter. Cheech ended up working with him for about a year. And then he heard about me. And then he went to Banff, where he broke his leg skiing for the first time without lessons, compound fracture. And while he was in recovery, the only album this woman had where he was recovering was Diana Ross' Love Child album. And on the album was Does Your Mama Know About Me? And he would play that over and over again. And then he looked at who wrote this? And then he saw my name, T. Chong. And then in the meantime, I got fired from Motown, went back to Vancouver to work in the nightclubs. We had 2 nightclubs by then. And one of the clubs was a strip joint that I started. I actually started the first strip club in Vancouver.
Good job.
And that was when I had nothing to do. Like, the band was literally taken from me, And the band never stuck up for me either, which thank God they didn't. But I'd still be a memory of Motown. But anyway, I started working in the strip club, and I realized that because I owned the club, I could do whatever I want with the club. So I turned it into an improvisational theater, using the girls as actresses. And then I had a couple of friends that came on board as actors, I tried to get the doorman to be an actor, and he said, I'll do it if you do it. And so I said, okay. And so next thing you know, I'm on stage as well as writing the show. Oh, then the word got out that I was back in town. And then this great guitar player from Edmonton came right down, because it was, again, it's very serendipity. Very spiritual too, with the I Ching. He was the one that introduced me to the I Ching. But he came down, Gay DeLorme. And Gay was this genius guitar player and songwriter and everything. Gay actually helped me write the first bit for our strip club. We had a straight man, a real actor, but his wife found out what he was doing because we got so popular. We ended up in the paper. And the shot they wanted was the two strippers singing with their titties over Rick Lane's one in either ear. And he's smiling at the camera, and his wife yarded him out of there. So we were looking for a straight man. And this Russian, there's always a Russian connection in there somewhere. First with Johantrek, and now this other Russian. Ihor. I remember his name, Ihor Turduk. Anyway, he said, there's this guy that's worked for me, and he's really funny, and he would be perfect for the show. And so I went down where they were. He was doing a hippie magazine, and Cheech was writing the music reviews. And so I met Cheech for the first time, and we looked at each other. He didn't know what I was. I didn't know what he was. I never seen a Mexican up close before, you know. And so I had no idea he was Mexican. And I had no idea how Mexican he was until we got to L.A. So Cheech was like the third man in the group. But when we got fired, my brother actually fired us because we had ruined the club. We changed it from all these rich, horny businessmen and bikers, you know, throwing money at everybody, to a theater where people count their change and sip a little glass of wine. You know? And so we were packing the joint, but we were losing money. So my brother said, we got to go back to the strippers. And so the group was going to break up because the girls had to go back stripping. And so Cheech and I put a band together. We went out to the first gig was a battle of the bands, which we won. And we never played a note. We just went out there and did comedy that we got together. We're improvisational. Anyway, so that was it. That night, driving home, and we were trying to figure out what we should call ourselves. And I said, do you have a nickname? And he said, Cheech. And I said, Cheech and Chong.
Nice.
And that was it.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors.
Now, I didn't know how good I had it till I met some other whiskeys from the city. It turns out a small town and an even smaller batch made me the most headstrong spirit both sides of the Pecos. Call me critical batch, Texas bourbon. Raised by a sailor in Bulverde, Texas, bottled at 110 proof, they took me out of the barrel and didn't know which end to slap. So why don't you come taste the pure definition of bourbon, grain to barrel to bottle, and join our little rebellion. You may all go to the liquor store. I'll be at Chaplin Distillery, 30790 Blanco Road in Bulverde, Texas. Ask for CB in the tasting room, and I'll see you soon. That was the Bourbon Talking, Streetwalkers. Chaplin Distillery is proudly veteran-owned and operated. Follow them on Instagram and Facebook, or go to chaplindistillery.com. And maybe I'll see you at the tasting room.
Let's get back into it.
So you wrote Does Your Mama Know About Me?
I wrote the lyrics. I'm a poet more than anything. In fact, I saw the Bob Dylan documentary. Bob and I are born in the same birthday, and we're only a few years apart. I'm older than him, but we both share a birthday, and we share the same kind of humor, the same kind of talent, because he's a poet, but he was a way better musician than I, and photographic memory. But I'm sort of like a Dylan-esque kind of a poet. And I wrote Does Your Mama Know About Me? And I wrote Up in Smoke, and I wrote Get It Legal, and I wrote all these songs. Right now, I'm working on the Canadian anthem.
Really?
And I'm changing the word. Oh, cannabis. You mean the world to me. Green leafy smell. So, yeah, I write. I can't help it write. I write like people scratch their balls sometimes, instinctively, incessantly.
Well, let me ask you this, and it's okay if you say no, I'll just take it out. But can I play Does Your Mama Know About Me from Bobby Taylor and the Vancouvers?
Sure.
Is that cool?
Sure.
Oh man, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Does he think the usual way? Maybe I shouldn't worry, but I've been through this before, and I'd like to get things straight before I'm knocking on your door. Does she notice what I am? She says for you. About your friends, do you care what people say? Will you accept the burdens I know will surely come your way? Maybe I shouldn't worry, but I've been through this before, and I'd like to get things straight before I'm knocking on your door. Every day I see it grow, and I don't want to let it go. I guess that's why I gotta know. Does your mama know about me? Does your mama know? Does your mama know about me? Does your mama know? Does your mama know about me?
And Tommy, I know that you have a whole bunch of stuff coming up, right? You've got a whole line of cannabis products. You and Cheech, I guess your company, y'all are thinking about doing some dispensaries.
Well, because of the pandemic, we're opening, or we've already opened, takeout, Cheech and Chong's takeout. We're going to do some promos for it. But yeah, it's takeout right from the farm to your door. Yeah.
So that's a delivery service?
A delivery service. Yep. Yep.
Oh, very cool. So you can order a pizza and your weed.
That's right. And hope the weed gets here first. Then the pizza won't go to waste for sure.
Nah, the pizza will be so much better. Do you come up with inventive names for your different your different strains or whatever? Do you got cool names?
That part of our life, the record part of our life and the movies and that, so long ago that we have other people, that, fans and coming up with the name of the strains. I can't buy into that strain thing because, to me, pot's pot. And I don't care what strain it is, as long as it does the job.
You should call one Fascination Street.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I can call it that. Yeah.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors.
Now available wherever you buy audiobooks. Richard Stanley's Up on Game. From robbing banks to ruling his prison gang. Paco got spun out on meth one week and hit the yard with a box cutter in hand. He'd apparently been holding a grudge against some new guy. He was from the same car as Paco, but he seemed to prefer to stick to himself. The quiet new guy was in his late 50s and sported dark brown hair and a handlebar mustache. For whatever reason, Paco decided to allegedly target this obscure and solitary member of his car. They say the man lay there on his bunk, reading a book, when Paco came into the building. He made his way toward the man's bunk in meth-fueled haste. With his box cutter gripped in his right hand and meth making most of his decisions, at that point, Paco lunged into the man's bunk and began slicing away. And slicing and slicing. Defensive wounds were dug into his forearms, and foot-long gashes were added to the quiet man's rib cage before Paco jumped off. Paco had sliced himself on his own left forearm during all the mayhem of his surprise visit with Mr. Obscure. Paco proceeded to haul ass out of there and headed back to his building. Delve into the true life story of Richard Stanley. Up on Game, from robbing banks to stacking Bitcoin. And the sequel, Up on Game, When I Ruled the World. Now available wherever you get audiobooks.
Let's get back into it.
Now, I want to tell you a story. When I was a little kid, we lived in an apartment complex, and me and my buddy, one summer, we decided that every time somebody got kicked out of the apartments, we would just go into the dumpsters and see what got thrown away, right? And one day, me and my buddy found 3 Cheech Chong albums in this dumpster.
Woo.
Now, keep in mind, I'm like 7, all right? And the ones that we found were your first one, which was the yellow one, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then we found the wedding album, and then Sleeping Beauty.
Oh.
Okay, so I took it back to my house and listened to it. You know, this is back in the day. These are vinyl records, everybody.
Yep.
Now, the album covers, the envelopes or whatever, they were all torn to shit, but whatever. The albums were unmolested, right? Not scratched up or anything. So I'm listening to this one sketch called The Tactical Women's A.lert Team. And let me tell you, Tommy Chong, that as a 7-year-old,
you had no idea.
I was so fucking confused about every word, basically, of that sketch.
That was the skit that my son, same age, I guess, he had a problem with. He never understood. And then one day he walked in, he goes, I got it. So what happened?
Call me stupid or whatever, but it was probably nearly a decade after that before I was like, oh, I get it.
Oh.
Muff Productions presents TWAT, Tactical Women's A.lert Team. TWAT, a crack unit of highly trained specialists dedicated to protect and serve the Department of the Interior. TWAT, always prepared, always alert, ready to open up at a moment's notice. TWAT, dangerous, deadly, devouring. TWAT, the most powerful force on Earth. TWAT.
Man.
I know.
You really confused the shit out of I'm just going to assume a whole lot of little me's.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we had so much fun doing that bit. Oh, my God. But, you know, Cheech and I instinctively went to that age for some reason, you know. I mean, the whole thing, the whole bit, man. Oh, yeah. We had so much fun doing those things.
I'm sure you did. It sounded like you guys had a fucking blast, and that is super awesome.
Can you imagine that was our job?
No, I can't imagine.
Even when we didn't want the job, Lou Adler, our record producer, you know, he'd send a crew, one guy, to wherever we were performing live, and we would do albums, you know, on the road. Like we did one in Montreal, we recorded in Chicago, Ottawa, all over the world. That was good. You know, it wasn't until our 3rd trip to Australia that I realized, okay, this is redundant. You know, it's time to move on. And that's when I wanted to do a movie. And that's when we quit and did Up in Smoke.
No. And that, golly, I think, didn't that movie celebrate like 30 years, a couple years ago or something? That's been a while, right?
Oh, 40, 50 years.
What? Not 50. Come on now.
Well,
not 50.
It was 78. was when it was released.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, yeah. Holy moly, man. 40. Yeah, we're at 44 years or something now. Good job. Yeah. Holy shit.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors.
Now available wherever you buy audiobooks. Richard Stanley's Up on Game. From robbing banks to ruling his prison gang. Paco got spun out on meth one week and hit the yard with a box cutter in hand. He'd apparently been holding a grudge against some new guy. He was from the same car as Paco, but he seemed to prefer to stick to himself. The quiet new guy was in his late 50s and sported dark brown hair and a handlebar mustache. For whatever reason, Paco decided to allegedly target this obscure and solitary member of his car. They say the man lay there on his bunk, reading a book, when Paco came into the building. He made his way toward the man's bunk in meth-fueled haste. With his box cutter gripped in his right hand and meth making most of his decisions, at that point, Paco lunged into the man's bunk and began slicing away. And slicing and slicing. Defensive wounds were dug into his forearms, and foot-long gashes were added to the quiet man's rib cage before Paco jumped off. Paco had sliced himself on his own left forearm during all the mayhem of his surprise visit with Mr. Obscure. Paco proceeded to haul ass out of there and headed back to his building. Delve into the true life story of Richard Stanley. Up on Game, from robbing banks to stacking Bitcoin. And the sequel, Up on Game, When I Ruled the World. Now available wherever you get audiobooks.
Let's get back into it.
Tell me about being in prison with Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wallstreet. I know you got stories about that, dude.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'm sorry. Was it prison or jail that you were in?
It was prison.
Okay. All right.
Federal camp. It was Taft camp. Yeah, I had been there for a while, and then rumor went out that this Jordan Belfort was going to be in there, and then he appeared, and they put us together right away because they always do that with celebrities, And so we were sharing a cubicle, and Jordan would play in tennis, and he's a multitasker. He'd be hanging with a guy playing backgammon, and he'd be talking to somebody else about something totally different. He's quite a genius, without doubt. And he loved to talk. And so every night before we go to sleep, he would tell me stories about his escapades, In the meantime, I started writing my book, Cheech Chong. And after a while, he noticed me writing. And then he goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm writing a book." And I love Jordan. He didn't say, "What's the book about?" or anything. It was like, "I'm going to write a book." That's what he said. "I'm going to write a book." And so he, the next day, he wrote down about 2-3 pages and handed it to me right away. I never asked for him. He just, boom, "What do you think?" So he hands me the paper and I'm reading it. And I never said anything. And the thing is about writing, and I knew Jordan well enough. I knew exactly what buttons to push. And because don't forget, I've been with Motown, I've been with Cheech, I've been with improvisational theater. And so I didn't say anything. I handed the pages back. He says, "What do you think?" And I know what he was looking for, "Oh my God, you're such a genius." And I says, "Well, to be honest, you really haven't written shit." And he go, "What?" And I says, "You just copied the Bonfires of the Vanities, word for word, I might add, because then I found out later that he has a photographic memory. Bob Dylan has the same ability.
Oh,
you can hear a song once, twice, and he knows it from top to bottom.
Wow.
And so Jordan Belfort, when I told him, "Yeah, I'm writing shit," he says, I got to hand it to him. He goes, "Well, what should I write?" And I told him, I said, "Write those stories you've been telling me every night. That's what you want to write." And then I give him the most of law.
What is that?
When you're writing anything, like when they wrote the Bible, they did the most of. The Hebrews did just escape from Egypt. God stopped the Red Sea and parted the Red Sea. And then the Hebrews got across, but then when the pharaohs and their armies come in, the sea closed in on them and drowned them all. That's the most of.
So go big.
Go big. And so I said, like, if you're writing about being high, you're not just high. Everybody can get high. You're so high that people are want to read more about your book. So he got it. He got that right away. And you know what? I think that was the last time we really had a conversation.
Really?
Because he got so into writing. That's all he did. He just sat and wrote. Because I set the ball in motion, you know. Now he knows what he has to do. And like I said, he's a genius. He's a genius. Next thing I know, we got out of prison. I'm at home and he's on probation too. And he pulls up in his car, a convertible, and he goes, "Hey, Tom, I sold my book. It's going to be a movie. It's going to be a movie."
Nice. And that's the Wolf of Wall Street.
That's the Wolf of Wall Street, yeah. And I got to tell you that the Wolf of Wall Street movie and the book didn't record everything that Jordan told me.
Really?
He told me stories that were just so crazy, because he was a Quaalude freak, and Quaaludes can get you in all sorts of trouble.
Yeah, tell it to Bill Cosby.
No kidding, huh? Yeah. Do you want to hear my theory about Bill and the sex guys?
I would love to hear it. Hit me.
They are suffering from what I call excessive testosterone.
Really?
Think about it. I started doing testosterone, just a few years ago because, I'm getting old and all sorts of things, and my favorite guy was not performing. And so I took testosterone supplements, sure. Got shots, and it awoke the desire in me. Unfortunately, it didn't help with the physical part of it.
Really? But
it awoke the desire to the point where I could see where these guys would go crazy, because it's there. There's no reason, they can take it. It's like a kleptomaniac alone in a rich man's house. There's so many things to steal. You don't think of circumstance. All you think about is fulfilling that urge you got. It's an itch. And when you reach it, you scratch it until you bleed. And that's excessive testosterone. Because why else would these guys like Cosby or what's his name?
Weinstein,
all those guys. Why else? Como in New York. Yeah, he's single and now he has trouble keeping his hands off women. Too much testosterone.
Wow.
And then think about the Muslims. Muslims know the ancient men. They know their desires and the fears and the dangers. And that's why they cover their women up. It's not to hide them. It's to protect them.
Wow. Never heard anybody put that forth.
I know. I'm a genius at thinking of all sorts of weird shit like that.
There you go. That's what makes you, man. That's what makes you so successful in so many different endeavors.
Yeah.
Tommy, is there anything that we didn't talk about or I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about today, man? Did I miss anything? You want to talk about some NFTs or something?
Well, the NFTs, I'm in with Cheech. And we got some, but I'm going to do some of my own Tommy Chong NFTs that have nothing to do with Cheech and Chong. And I'm going to go very, very high end because when I was in jail, I came up with this idea of $1 million bomb, and of course it got a lot of laughs from everybody. And someone said to me, "Who's going to buy $1 million bomb?" I said, "A guy with too much money."
That's right. That is correct.
There's a lot of people in this world now with too much money.
Well, think about all those stupid ass, like you go to New York and then some bars like, "Hey, we've got a $10,000 martini." It's a fucking martini with a $9,000 diamond in it or whatever. I mean, there's people with too much money for sure.
Yeah. And you need to service them. You need to help
Absolutely.
them.
They're going to spend it somewhere.
That's it. And so that's what NFTs are. And that's what I'm going to do with my art, with my pipes. You see, I'm an artist. But I've never tested the waters in a sense of going all the way. It's like my team club in Calgary. I'm the kind of guy, it works. Great. Okay, let's move on to something else.
You're like, oh, I did it. Cool. Now I'm see what else I can do.
Yeah, that's what I am. And I love the idea of the NFTs. I had that idea. I didn't call it NFTs, but I had that idea about doing my art and then not selling anything while I'm alive. Just hoarding it, putting it away. And that's really, really what an NFT is,
That's kind of what Frank Sinatra did. He did a bunch of paintings that didn't really see the light of day until he died.
Yeah, that's what I want to do.
Wow.
Were they good? I didn't see any of the Frank's stuff.
You can Google it. A bunch of them will come up. They even made a coffee table book out of some of his stuff. Some of them are really, really cool. Some of them are not so cool. There's a range. You could see where he was learning and then got better. You can see that sort of a progression. They even made a they made a line of neckties. The pattern on the necktie was his prints, his paintings.
Oh, right. And then neckties sort of fell out of fashion. So.
A little bit. A little bit, yeah.
Do you remember what the necktie was, where it originated from?
I have no idea, man.
Was it from the bandana, first for the dust around your thing?
I don't think so, because a necktie doesn't make any fucking sense, and a bandana did.
Where I'm at now in my life, I'm such an observer. Because I'll tell you, spoiler alert, by the way, I realize why the older you get, the more spiritual you become and the more adept that you become at what you do, the more you just smile and laugh and shut the fuck up. Because when you do learn, like all the gurus, most of them do, when you do learn where we're at and why we're here, then nothing really matters, you know. Like, I think the Christians got it wrong. In fact, I know they got it wrong because to begin with, the Christians, what they try to do is separate a Jew prophet to own Jesus. You know, they couldn't own him while he was alive, but now that he's dead, now they can own him. Co-opt Jesus, you know, actually take him. Because Jesus was never a Christian. Never. Jesus was a Jew. He was born a Jew. He lived a Jew and he died a Jew. And the only thing he left us was the knowledge that there is a spiritual world and that no matter what you do on earth, that eventually you're going to find out all about the spiritual world. And what I found out, you know, I don't know how people take it. I don't care, really. In the physical world, which we live in, everything has an opposite, you know. Like Trump says, there's nice people on both sides. And that's the way it is. So we're just people. And we're here. Some of us are evolved to the point where we know how to live. Because all the Bible really did, among other things, was to set rules. You see, you need rules. You need order in order to evolve and to survive and to flourish. But you need rules. And when you break the rules, you suffer the consequences. And that's the way it is. And then the trouble with the people that break the rules, they don't believe in the rules. Well, it's easy to say, I don't believe that. It's easier to plead ignorance. Just, no, that can't happen, you know, and quote someone else. But what you're seeing when you hear that is you're seeing an unevolved human being, you see, because once they evolve, and once they learn the rules and why they're there, then they evolve to another level where there's more rules and even another level where there's even more rules. But as humans, here's the deal. We're eternal beings. Now, not you or me per se, the Tommy Chong that I am. No, I am a person that's going to be here one time and gone forever. You know, just like a snake shedding its skin. He doesn't put the skin away and maybe he's going to use it for later. Mm-hmm. That's done. It disintegrates. Why? Because he has a new skin. And as humans, we're evolving. And the more we evolve, the more we learn. And the more we learn, the more we have to shut up to let other people evolve, you see?
Interesting.
Yes.
Is that why you think the mind is the most sacred thing in the human body?
It is. It is. Because it's the spirit. Or it's a connection to the spirit. You see, we're connected to the spirit. See, the great thing about being in this physical world, we have freedoms because you have to have freedoms. You have to have freedoms to make mistakes. That's how you learn, you know, like electricity. And by the way, everything can be explained by electricity, positive, negative. You can't have one without the other. You can't have electricity without having positive and negative. And that's life. That's the universe. And by the way, what's the opposite of everything?
Nothing.
That's right. So the spiritual world is really nothing.
And everything.
No, it's nothing.
No, just nothing.
It's nothing. It's nothing. It's nothing but electricity, a thought. That's how far we are from God. A thought. You don't have to do all the rituals and chant and do all that. If that's what gets you off, that works for you. Or if that what gets you out of your preconceived upbringing, say, and that helps you move into the thing. But the truth is, the mind is so beautiful that all you have to do is, this is what I tell people now when I do cameos. To be happy, there's a few things you got to do. One, lose anger. Lose the anger about anything. There's no need. There's no really anger interrupts. Anger is frustration that you don't know the truth when it comes right down to it. Because if you know the truth about anything and everything, there's no anger. Anger is frustration.
Right. It's also perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
My wife and I will be sitting in traffic and we're like, oh, the traffic. And then we'll just look at each other and go, you know what? At least we're together. That's
it. That's it. You got to speak it. You got the secret. Because everything is an adventure if you allow it to be. Like I heard when Saddam Hussein was executed, when they killed him, he was so cool because he was about to die and he got heckled. And right away he stops and he looks at the guy that heckled him. He says, watch, I will show you how a real man dies.
Damn.
And right there, I said, wow, he did it. Because what is death? Death is but a moment. It's another moment. That's all it is. It's a transition to who you really are. And what you really are is energy, and it's called spirit. And we are eternal spirits, just like music is eternal because there's no substance. It's electricity. It really is. And when you learn that, it's easy, but yet you have to have patience. And that's why I learned that most gurus that I've seen, they always have a little cosmic laugh. They go, and the reason they do that is because, okay, yeah, that's cute. The way you think, the way you want to do everything, Okay. But if you really want to be happy, this is what you do. Lose the anger and judge not. I just realized it took me a bunch of years. I've been reading it, looking at it, and other books, I read Emmett Fox, I read Joel Goldsmith, and I see what they're trying to get through to us, how to live on this plane of existence and be of use, because that's the other thing we have to be. We have to be of use because we are neighbors. We're connected. You and I are connected. We're really connected now. The people that are trying to mess up, they're just on the wrong track. That's all. They're just doing the wrong thing, and eventually they will learn how to do the right thing. And it never stops. But we're evolving. We're evolving. And that's why some of the holy books say that we can evolve to the point where we ourselves become gods. And wow, that's something nice to look forward to.
Yeah, isn't it though? Wow, some might say that makes all of this worth it.
What choice do we have?
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah.
What choice indeed.
Yeah.
Tommy, Mr. Chong, I feel like I could talk to you all day, but I also feel like I've taken up so much of your time already, man. You have been so gracious with your time and your stories and your spirituality. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to hang out and let us get to know you a little bit better on Fascination Street, man. I really appreciate it.
I like being on Fascination Street. Things fascinate me. I'll tell you one more story. My uncle, who I'm named after, Tommy Chong. Well, him and my dad, they were tight, but Tommy was older, so he went the educational way. My dad went the hustler way, ended up joining the Canadian artillery, and ended up doing service in World War II as an artilleryman in Italy and England, I think. He won't talk about the war. He never did talk about the war.
Your dad?
Yeah. He never talked about anything, period. Yeah.
He didn't even say he was home when he got home. So.
No. But my mom would tell me stories about my uncle. And he was like a diving coach in Edmonton. And he was a great gymnast. And he was academic. He was all these things. And we didn't know. We had no connection. You get a Christmas card from him every year at Christmas. And so my mother told me he lived alone in this little apartment in Edmonton, and he had his bicycle on the wall. And back in the day, it was like, wow, you put a bike on the wall? How crazy is that? And she told me all these things. And so when my buddy, the one that tried to steal the car, he ended up with his dad's car, he said, let's go to Edmonton. And I said, yeah, I'll go visit my uncle. I was 15, 16 at the time. So we get in the car, we drive the 3 hours to Edmonton. You get there at 6 a.m. I go to my uncle's address. My mother gave the address of her friends in Edmonton and that. It was exciting. It was our first trip out of Calgary. And so I get 6 a.m. I knock on my uncle's door and it takes a while. He opens the door, just a crack. He goes, yeah. I says, Uncle Tommy, I'm your nephew. I'm Tommy. And he goes, yeah. I said, well, we just wanted to come and say hi. He says, well, hi. I said, oh, okay. Well, that's all. He said, okay. He closed the door.
For real? Hilarious.
He closed the door. And so I had another phone number of this lady, Of course, it's always women. They take care of you, And so I called her and then she said, oh, come on over. I got a place where you guys can stay. And tonight you're lucky. We got a party we're going to go to and blah, blah, blah. We go to a party, we meet, all that. So years later, now I'm getting reviews for the movies.
Yeah.
I get a letter from my uncle. And in it were the reviews from Edmonton. And now he's really interested in my career because I'm Tommy Chong. Like he's Tommy Chong. Anyway, he came to visit my dad and stayed at my dad's house. Well, it was my house, but he stayed there. He didn't want to know the poor ass kid that couldn't make high school.
Mm-hmm.
But he wanted to know the movie actor, the successful one, that is more famous than he was.
People are funny, man.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. We connected. He never had a whole lot to say. And I think he was gay. I'm quite sure. Well, The Bachelor all his life. He could have been asexual too,
Sure.
I don't know. But
I think he didn't let you in that morning because he had somebody there. He had a gentleman caller. That's what it was. He didn't want the secret to get out because back then that was a big secret.
I think more than anything, he never had my dad either. I think my grandpa's Canadian family, because don't forget, Grandpa, who I never met, Sam, I think it's Samuel, he came and lived in Vancouver and he had a family. And my grandmother, Annie Song, that was her name. Isn't that a great name?
That's a gorgeous name.
She was the first Chinese pilot to fly a plane in Canada.
Wow.
And she ran an acting theater, a Chinese acting theater, which I think I got my chops from. But I'm just learning, going to the ancestry thing and finding out all my relatives. But I'm having a ball, man.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, before I let you go, I've been talking to you this whole time. Hey, man, can I talk to Dave?
No, Dave's not here, man.
I had to do it. I know it's hacky as shit, but I had to do it.
You want to hear that story?
Tell that story.
The Dave's not here bit. Actually, we invented a style of comedy that's still here today. It's pure improvisational. Because what happened? We ended up doing a showcase for Warner Brothers. We've been playing at the Troubadour for quite a while, and we were like the on-sign hit act. And so Lou Adler heard that we were doing a showcase for Warner Brothers, so he snuck in the back door and he got in there free, and he heard us, and then he put out word that he wanted to talk to us.
Who was he with at the time? A&M?
A subsidiary of A&M. He had his own label called Old Records.
Okay.
And so Cheech and I went and visited him, and right away he said, well, what do you want to do? And I grew up with comedy records. I had a Lenny Bruce record, it was my first comedy record. I think that was done other than Red Fox. Red Fox was considered a party record. Lenny Bruce was considered like a first stoner. He talked about drugs and everything, freedom of speech and that. So when we went to Lou, he said, what do you want to do? How can I help you? I said, we want to make a comedy record. He goes, okay, what do you need? And I said, $1,000. And Cheech says, make that $2,000 where there's two of us. But the truth is, I got to tell you the truth right now. Cheech never said a word, but, being a good partner. No, I said $1,000, and he started writing the check. I said, well, it's $1,000 a piece. And no problem. So he wrote out $2,000, $1,000 to Cheech, $1,000 to me. Oh, and I need a little tape recorder, miniature tape recorder. He said, okay. So anyway, I got the tape recorder. The next day, we go to this little mix down room in A&M Records. We talked, our first bit's going to do a dope dealing. Okay. So the idea was he's going to knock on the door. I open the door, let him in. He comes in. We talk about doing a drug bust, blah, blah, blah. We'll see where it goes. Well, the door locked from inside. And outside was like almost like a day like this, only even hotter. It was like 100 degrees out in the little courtyard there. And it was the Charlie Chaplin, the studio. And it's where he shot a lot of his early movies. He used that particular little area we used. And so anyway, Cheech is outside. And Cheech is an actor, what do you call it? Method. So he puts on the costume and everything. You know, it's a record.
It's an audio recording and he's wearing a costume.
And he puts on a costume. Yeah. Because, you know, that's the way Cheech is. You know, he has to put on the right thing. And so he goes outside and he knocks on the door. Well, I wasn't ready with the tape recorder. I wasn't sure if the tape recorder was working or not, you know, and I thought I did it right. And so I didn't answer him right away. So then he knocked again. And again, I looked up. I didn't look at the tape recorder. So I looked at the tape recorder and I was supposed to let him in. I wasn't supposed to say, who is it? But I wanted to see if the tape recorder was working. So I go, who is it? And I see the needle jump. So it's working. Perfect. And Cheech paused. Then he falls in the car. He goes, it's me, man. I got the stuff. So I just paused, wait. And I thought he was going to say something else, but he didn't. So then he knocks again. I said, oh, we're going to start the bit over again. So again, I look at the tape recorder. I go, who is it? And Cheech gets a little annoyed. It's me, man. Come on, open up. The cops are out there. Come on, I got the stuff. So now I heard his annoying thing, and I got him. I got him. I'm not going to let him in. So he knocks again, and then I go, who is it? He's getting mad. He's really getting mad. Come on, open up, man. I got this. Nothing. He knocks again. This time, and when I say, who is it? He goes, it's Dave, man. Now, Dave was my first partner's name, Dave Graham.
Okay.
And I can just see Cheech. That's the only thing you think is Dave. It's Dave. Like I'm trying to get him to say something. And when I said, Dave's not here, because I'm trying to torture the shit out of him. And he goes, I'm Dave, man. Oh, man. I opened the door and he was so mad. He's throwing shit at me. This costume's so hot. I could have got sunstroke, man. And I said, wait, listen. And so we played it back. We must have listened to that record at least an hour, maybe more, over and over again. And that's just on the little tape recorder. And so then Cheech took it and showed it to everybody. Well, the minute Lou heard it, boom, he said, we got to record that. You know, because we were just rehearsing. And so we go out that night and we record it. And that morning, it was on every radio station in America.
That fast, huh? Wow.
That's Lou Adler. See, anybody else, it would have sat there. But he knew, you know what I call it? It's like deep sea fishing. You can hook on the fish, but the trick is to get him in the boat.
Yeah.
You see. And that's what recording or anything like that. Yeah, you can record a hit record, but you got to get it played. And you got to get it in the right people. You know, that's what payola and all that stuff was. Lou was just pure talent. It was a record that people couldn't believe that they were hearing. And then I'd heard the radio stations. Oh, I had calls from all my friends. They're playing your record. They're playing it. And when I heard it on the air, I could see that was the most perfect comedy bit done on record, as far as I'm concerned. You know, it didn't have to set up anything. It just was. It just happened. And because Cheech would not break character, he's a genius at that. You know, because everybody, Bob Hope, everybody, all those, Johnny Carr, everybody broke character.
Yeah.
Maybe Mel Brooks, even Mel Brooks, they weren't really doing it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But Cheech and Chong, we're authentic. We are who we say we are, you know, like all these other guys, they do it for the camera, they do it, you know, and then they become their other personas, or like Robin Williams would just go within, you know, almost like a turtle, you know. But Cheech and Chong, I mean, what you see is what you get, and it hasn't changed.
I love that you guys are still friends after all these years. I love that.
We're still working. We're still working together. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. That's fantastic. Tommy, I'm going to let you go now, man.
Okay, guy.
My friend, Tommy Chong, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And you have a great weekend, man.
I will. Take care now.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Miss American Pie.
Opening music is the song Magnolia from the 2001 album Intransigence, used with permission from Douglas Miles Clark. Closing music is from the song Say My Name off the 2021 album Underdog Anthems, used with permission from Jack's Hollow. If you like the show, tell a friend. Subscribe and rate and review the show on iTunes and wherever else you download podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. All the episodes are available there as well. Check me out on Vero at Fascination Street Pod and TikTok at Fascination Street Pod. And again, thanks for listening.